And Jhonny?
Yeah, we good.
Cool. Right, let's go. So good morning, everyone. Welcome to the third installment of this Mastering Microsoft Intune webinar series. So this is as I said, the third of the series. The first one we covered kind of an Intune overview and around kind of more device management. Second, we kind of went into the application side, looking at management and security. And since then, we've had a few conversations with customers, with prospects, and actually what people seem to want is more around kind of application packaging. So we built this kind of webinar with Jhonny, purely focusing on that topic, and Jhonny's going to get more into that later on. But before I hand over to him, just a little bit of housekeeping. So for those who've been on these webinars before, and pretty standard practice, your microphones are muted. There is a Q&A and also the chat open, so I'll be monitoring both of those. So if you've got any questions, please do check it in either of those, and I can either jump in or I can wait to the end to see what the time is right. If this does prompt any kind of support or any questions, please do check in the chat and we can get back to you afterwards as well. Jhonny's on hand at any point really. And that's kind of it from me. So I'm going to pass over to Jhonny to lead today's webinar.
Excellent. I think the animations are not working. You can see everything, right?
Yeah, all good. No, all perfect.
Yeah, I had animations that used to pop up and everything, but it might start working throughout the session. But thank you for everyone who joined so far. As Dave has mentioned, this is the third installment, focusing a little bit more on app packaging. On our previous session, we went over app management. We focused on the stores and app security, protecting your data. And we always had a app packaging webinar planned, and this is what we are focusing more on today. We'll still go over a quick overview on app management in Intune, the app life cycle. We'll go over the stores and different options that you have in order to add apps to Intune. But what we'll be focusing today will be why and how do we package apps on Intune. We have a packaging demonstration from downloading the packaging tool to actually packaging it and finally configuring those packages in Intune. We'll talk about deployment strategies and best practices when doing so. Now, these are just two examples of different apps that we can package. There are tens of different types of apps and for either Windows, Apple, iOS that we can package and deploy. But today we're focusing on Windows. This hopefully gives you a little bit of a taste on how you can package and deploy apps on Intune. So if you do have any questions, the demos are pre-recorded. So whilst they're playing, if you have any questions, you can pop them on the Q&A and I'll be able to answer those questions while the demos are ongoing. They are quite long, so I'll try to go through these slides as quickly as I can so we can have those demos playing, and that's where hopefully you'll get a lot of the insight and an understanding on how the packaging process works. Before we dive into app packaging, I think it will be a mess if we don't actually talk about how Intune helps you manage apps and the deployment of apps. Now, when I started IT many years ago, a lot of my time was spent on installing, updating, removing, and upgrading apps across hundreds of users. I wasn't lucky in a sense that we didn't have an app management tool. We had to do all of that manually, and there was a lot of bespoke apps that didn't have soft updaters, so you needed to replace and remove and replace apps. So it was quite a full-time job in and of itself for myself at the time. So when I came across Intune, it wasn't just a shift of technology, it was a complete game changer. Intune brought everything together for me, so providing a streamlined, secure, and manageable way to complete the app life cycle. And what this slide does, it represents that life cycle from adding the app, which can be done via any of the stores, be it the Microsoft, Apple, or Google Play stores, or LOB apps or line of business apps such as EXEs or MSI apps that you need to package, which is what we will be doing today. You then configure that app to ensure that it functions properly within the organization. You then protect that app with app protection policies, conditional access policies, which we went into and did a demonstration on our previous webinar that I'm quite certain David will be sharing with you if that's something that you're interested in. Once you protect that app, you then assign it. That can be done to users or groups. You can use dynamic groups, or you can use user-based assignments to target specific devices or users or even locations if you have multiple offices across the world. You then deploy that app. That can be done automatically deployed. Then you push the app to any device automatically, or you can make that app available on the company portal where users can access the portal and install the apps if they need it or if they want that app to be installed. Once the app has been deployed, you then go into the monitoring management phase. And this is where you start monitoring the app, whether it will be app usage, compliance status, issue tracking if there is any conflicts or issues with the apps being deployed. You then maintain that app. If it is a store app, thankfully the store apps update themselves. If it is a line of business apps that you've packaged, you can then repackage a new version and upgrade it via Intune. And eventually that app will reach the end of its life. And this is where you remove the app when it's no longer needed, whether there is a newer version or you're moving on to a completely new app. And with the retirement, you can uninstall that app from corporate devices or even personal devices and the data within that app. So you can completely remove the app and your data from the environment. And that's, again, something that we go over on our previous sessions. So if that's something that you're interested in, please give that session a look. Now, how do we add apps exactly? Well, there's two ways. The first of those are the app stores. That can be the Microsoft Store, the Apple Store, or the Google Play Store. On here, you can configure, assign, and deploy the apps directly to end user devices. And like I mentioned, the good thing with the stores is there is automatic updates. As long as the app has been updated on the store and has been approved by the store, it will push those updates down to the devices. Now, the Microsoft Store specifically is getting better by the day. There is a lot of apps that have now been added, and they continue to add more apps to the store. So chances are a lot of the apps that you use on a day-to-day basis are already on the store, and it's just a matter of selecting the app, assigning it and deploying it, and not forgetting about it, but at least you know that the app will self-update, and all you need to do is make sure that it's updating, it's installing correctly, and eventually retire it if you need to move on or remove the app from the environment. But what happens if the apps that you need are not available? And this is when we go into the other type of installers. It can be a web link, such as access to a SaaS environment. You can deploy a web link app to a device that creates an entry on the desktop or on the programs list that literally, we can call it a SaaS environment. Click on it and it go directly on the browser. It can be an inbuilt app or a line of business or Windows app. That can be an EXE, MSI file. And these apps, if they are bespoke apps and they're not available on the store, how do we actually install them and deploy them via Intune? This is where packaging apps for Intune comes in. The way that we do that is with the Intune app preparation tool. What the Intune app preparation tool, as you will see in the demo that follows, is a glorified script that asks you for the location of your installer. It can be an MSI file, like EXE, APK, APA. You then select an output location, and the tool will then package that app into an Intune WIN file that is compatible and ready to be uploaded into Intune. Now, unlike the store apps, unfortunately, with the packaged apps, you will need to make sure that your version control is in place. So you add the version that you currently deploy into the apps. You need to ensure that you input the correct detection tools. That can be a location on the C drive for a folder or an exe or an MSI product code, so that Intune knows once the app has been deployed, that has been successfully deployed. You need to make sure that your uninstall capabilities are working. That can be, again, an exe that uninstalls the application. It can be the uninstall.exe. You need to make sure that those commands are inputted within the configuration of the app. So whenever you get to the point of upgrading or removing the app, Intune can do that for you. We'll go over that on the demo. So if you do have any questions, maybe hold off until that demo has happened, and then at the end of the session, you can always ask any questions that I might have missed. And again, you got to test. And I say that because you need to test to make sure that it's deploying correctly with your install commands. Intune can detect it correctly, and you can actually uninstall and upgrade that application. But
Jhonny, there's a couple of questions already in the chat.
Oh, do we have?
Yes. We do. I don't know. They might be, but yeah, they might make more sense after the demo. But I'm going to ask them now as they've come in. So the first one was: is it possible to add files such as a license file to an Intune package, so that they are automatically placed in a specific folder, e.g., within a program files after the application is deployed?
Well, you need to package. Well, no, I'm just reading it. Is it possible to add a file such as license file to an Intune package so that it's automatically placed? You can do that during the packaging process. You can't do that after the fact. So you can bundle different things within a package that can be dependencies. So if an app has C++ or .NET is a dependency, you can bundle that within the packaging process. If there are DLLs or config files or license files, you can put that into the installation location. And we actually do that with an application in the session that follows, which is Premiere Pro. It includes a license, includes DLLs and config files. All you need to do is target the MSI, and Intune will package all of that into an Intune Win file. We have one for Chris, which is: can we get a link for the other two missed sessions? Yes, I think David, you will be sharing that.
Yeah, I'll respond to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's another question.
And yes, we can. We actually go over the supersedence method on the actual demo. Whilst I'm actually configuring it, I go over the different options and how it works, and how we can actually upgrade and replace apps. So that's actually in the demo that follows. If I'm not answering your question correctly, please be sure to nudge me back, and we can go over it on the Q&A session at the end of today's webinar. But I think those are the questions. There's a lot of things that we'll cover on the demos. They are quite long. It's about 30 minutes worth of demos. So there's a lot that we'll cover, and we go over all the different settings and options that are available. So yeah, if you do have any questions after those demos, please be sure to fire them across. Now, in terms of app packaging, now imagine your finance team relies on a specialized tool, a tax compliance tool that was built years ago. It's not on the Microsoft Store, and the vendor only releases occasional updates, and it doesn't self-update. It means that you actually manually have to update that app whenever a new update has been released. Yet this tool is critical. Everyone in the finance team needs it, and it must be kept up to date for compliance reasons. This is where Intune and the packaging process comes in. It allows you to wrap those older EXEs or MSI installers, control its versions, and push it to every single device seamlessly without you having to manually upgrade and install those apps or even update them. Well, why do we package the apps? Well, as I said, many critical business apps aren't in the official stores or use older, less flexible installers. Packaging them for Intune ensures that we can manage and deploy them centrally. We can control the version of those apps. Instead of relying on the end users or manual processes, we can decide which versions to deploy and exactly when to roll those out. This is especially important if if the app lacks the automatic update mechanism. And it's an enterprise integration. Intune provides a unified approach from packaging to deployment and reporting all in one place. This unification obviously helps you uh, keep your environment more consistent and compliant, especially if you have a specialized tool that needs to be kept up to date for compliance reasons. But how does it work? How does the actual process works? And this is where the Intune content prep tool comes in. It's an official tool by Microsoft that bundles EXEs, MSIs, or any other types of installation files into a single Intune Win file package. It generates the metadata for Intune. So if you're using an MSI file, it will generate that metadata such as the install commands on install commands detection parameters. But if you're using exe, you will need to create those yourself, and I'll go over it on the demo. The key steps, obviously, to actually package your apps is to gather the installers and dependencies. That can be, as I said, it can be the .NET framework, or it can be config files, DLLs, licensing files. You gather all of those into an install location. You then run the PowerShell, the Intune prep tool in a PowerShell or command prompt. Point it to your installed folder where all your installers, your DLLs, your config files, and your licensing files are in, and you let it package that app into an Intune Win file. Once you have that configured, you then go to your Intune portal, you add a new Win32 app, upload the newly packaged file, and then you can configure the install, uninstall commands, and detection rules. It really varies on the type of file. As I said, with MSI, a lot of that will be pre-filled in for you. But for exe, you will need to add those commands yourself, and we'll be configuring that on the demo, and you can see that for yourself firsthand. But if you don't want to bother with any of that, and you just want to, you don't want to be downloading the content prep tool, the installation files, organizing all of that, you can actually use third parties to package your apps for you. There are two services that I know of and I've tested in the past. One is Packager and another one is Optimized. It's basically a cloud environment that you allow connection to your tenant, and you can request applications through them. Because they've been going on for so many years, a lot of the applications are already packaged and have been requested by other companies within their ecosystem. So you can literally just connect to Packager, search for an app, click download, and it will directly download it to your environment without you having to package or bother testing if it works correctly. So that's an option if you don't want to go through packaging and managing your applications. Obviously, that's not free. It's for a premium, but that's something that's available to you if you so wish. There's additional considerations. Obviously, there's different installer types. We got the EXEs, there's silent switches, and different commands that you can add with the installer. So whenever you deploy it, you need to configure that on Intune. Those will need to be done manually. Thankfully, depending on the app, a lot of them have instructions on how to do that on their website, so you might be able to follow those. But if not, it's a trial and error process that I go over on the session that follows. And with the MSI, thankfully, it does all of that for you. It adds the commands, at least the most used commands, to the app to install silently, quietly in the background. And wherever you can, use MSIs. They work best, and they're the ones that give you the least headache, at least myself personally, from experience. You obviously need to make sure that it's important to use the correct detection tools, depending on a 64-bit or 32-bit framework. Intune obviously uses these tools to make sure that the application has been successfully installed. We have dependencies and prerequisites. So as I mentioned, if an application needs .NET or C++ or Java, you can upload those apps as part of the bundle with that you create, or you can have those separate and add those apps as dependencies to the app that you're deploying. And Intune will only deploy the app once it confirms that .NET Framework has been successfully installed on the device. And finally, you can do multi-app packaging, which I touched on. You can combine multiple installers, DLLs, configs, sensitive files into one singular package. However, it's from experience, it's always best to separate them in terms of your dependencies and your actual app. So if you do need .NET Framework or Java or C++, I recommend you separate them. Have those installed as a singular app, and then the actual app having C++ as a dependency. So Intune installs a dependency and then installs your app. It can always be hit and miss how it installs, and more often than not there are errors when you have multiple dependencies and apps into one package. It does work, but it sometimes it can be quite tricky. So that's why I recommend that you separate your dependencies and your actual app into two separate packages. Now, the demo that follows will be going through downloading the app and actually packaging those apps to have them ready to be deployed into Intune. So if you do have any questions while that demo is playing, please pop it into the Q&A and I can respond, or we can address them after the demo has played.
You're on mute, Jhonny.
Can you hear me now? Yeah.
We can, yeah.
Excellent. So that's how we package the apps. Obviously, it's a straightforward process. I've used an exe, an MSI for Google Chrome, and a package Premiere Pro that includes DLL files, config files, licensing files. And as I said, those are just 3 examples of different apps that you can package. But before we deploy and configure those apps into Intune, there are different strategies and best practices that we need to follow in the deployment process. The first decision that you need to make is whether these apps are going to be made available to the users via an on-demand service on the company portal, that the users can initiate the installation from the company portal. It's good for optional apps, or when you want the employees to decide if and when they want to install those apps, or you can make it required, which Intune pushes the app to assigned devices or users with no user action needed, ideally for critical or mandatory apps that must be on every device. You then need to do the phased approach. We start with a TAT, which is when IT verifies that the app deploys successfully, is detected, and is launching. You then go into user testing, user acceptance testing, where you get real end users to confirm it meets the business needs and it works as intended. And then you start going into a production rollout. It doesn't mean that you need to fully deploy it across every single device, where you can start with pilot and test groups that people can validate the app in small groups, like a subset of HR as an example, before rolling it out to everyone. And then obviously once the actual testing period has been completed, you can then deploy it to a broader group of users, or all of them. And the final thing that we need to decide on is the version control. Each time you update your package, you need to make sure that you keep the version number, and you keep a track of that version number, so you know which version has been deployed to your devices. Make sure that you keep the older Intune win file if you need a quick rollback and the latest version has issues. You can then assign the app with dynamic groups, either by assigning by department, whether it will be HR, finance, or via device type. It can be a desktop, tablet, or even location-based. This ensures that you can easily segregate pilot and production devices or specific roles that need the app. In terms of best practices, again, we touched on them. Detection rules. You can use a file location, a registry entity, or an MSI check, so Intune knows when the app has been successfully installed. This avoids repeat installs and partial deployments. And always install the package on a few pilot devices to confirm the silent install commands, the detection rules, and any dependencies work correctly. The uninstall capability, you need to provide a valid uninstall command so Intune can properly remove or upgrade the app later. This helps if a new version conflicts or if there is a need for rollback. And documentation, keep a track of your packaging steps, your detection logic, and version history. It makes your troubleshooting easier, and it speeds up future app packaging efforts. And finally, monitoring and troubleshooting. You can check the deployment status, success, failure counts, and error messages via the Intune reports and logs. Or if you need more advanced tooling, you can integrate it with Power BI or log analytics for deeper insights, especially if you're doing large-scale rollouts, which allows you to spot trends like consistent failures on certain OS builds and allows you to react a lot more quickly. Now, on the demo that follows, we will actually be deploying the apps that we just packaged in Intune. We'll go through all the steps from actually uploading, configuring the commands, and going over the supersedences, dependencies, and assignment of the app. I know that we have a question in chat, so before we jump on, you have reached the recording limit for your plan. Okay, that's a bit. I think that's just spam. That's the first time I've seen that. Okay, so we'll go over to the demo now. And this is a longer demo, so if you do have questions, pop them in the chat. And oh, there we go. That's a note taker. Thank you. If you do have any questions whilst the demo is playing, pop them in the chat. I can respond to them while it's playing, or we can address them at the end of the demo. Excellent. So that was a quick run through. Obviously, there's a lot to go through, so I'll try to be as broad and as in depth as I could. But there is a lot more to it with the commands specifically. Those were simple commands that I used. Thankfully, a lot of companies now do have instructions on how to deploy apps on Intune if it's an executable or an MSI. So you can normally Google the name of the app and then Intune package, and it will normally give you instructions. But that was a quick run through on packaging and uploading apps to Intune and deploying them. Do we have any questions? I don't think we do. We will be sharing the other two sessions, which the first one of those is going over Intune, how to access Intune, licensing requirements, navigational tips. We go over device deployment, autopilot, configuration profiles, and all of that. And then the second session is app management and security, which we go over actually configuring apps on the store and deploying security policies, such as app protection policies. On that second webinar. So Dave will be sharing that with you in case you want to know more about those two. But yeah, if you do have any questions or any particular requests, or you want to discuss anything further, feel free to reach out. I'm more than happy to jump on a call and have a chat with you to discuss your requirements and what you might need.